Hello everyone, I'm Wesley, and today we're going to talk about every major camera brand and what I've learned after trying them all in about a year. Let's get it. Yes, you've heard that right. I'm at DEF CON level 5 gas. Gear acquisition syndrome has me hard. I've spent the last year trying every single camera brand, and I wanted to share my thoughts on each of them so that you can ultimately pick what calls to you and save all that money that I wish I had. All right, so let's get started with Canon. Canon's the one that I probably love to hate the most. I picked up the R8 and shot a wedding with the R6 II late last year, and my buddy shot my wedding with his Canon 5D Mark IV and gave me the raw files to edit. The files are great, the edit workflow isn't all that bad. When editing my wedding photos, I've had issues with white balance here and there, and I had to make some adjustments, but there could have been a lot of factors that led to that. I was able to overcome all of that in Lightroom. What really doesn't do it for me with Canon is the menus, the button placement, and the ergonomics. It just doesn't fit my shooting experience, and it ultimately wasn't for me for those reasons. In my opinion though, that's just a personal choice. So I would spend some time in the store playing around with the bodies to see if they ultimately do work for you and your hands. Canon's autofocus is right up there with the newest Nikon bodies. They used to be probably number 2 to Sony, but the latest Nikon bodies have really come a long way. And prior to the Z8 and Z9 and the ZF, Canon was the solid number 2, like I said, but Nikon's made a lot of strides in the last generation. I find Canon files lean to the yellow side. It's a little bit too much for my taste. I'll share some shots that I've shot with the Canon over the years, but for those reasons, I chose to move on to something else. And if you were looking for a great autofocus, something like sports, weddings, portraits, and Sony ergonomics weren't for you, I'd say look at Canon. A lot of sports photographers use Canon bodies, and one of the most prominent YouTubers, Peter McKinnon, is a big-time Canon user when he's not using his Leicas or shooting on film. And his photos are always amazing. I mean, these are raw files, guys. You can make them look like anything you want. From weddings to sports and general photography, Canon would be a great choice. If I were getting into nature or landscape, however, I'd look elsewhere. That's just me. And speaking of Sony, this is the brand that I started my whole photographic journey with, at least when it came to digital photography. I shot film with a Pentax way back in the 90s. But I got back into photography with the A7R II. I shot several page shoots. I did a website page shoot for someone paired with the 85, the 24, the 50. And more recently, I shot my Portugal trip with the A7 IV and the 50mm f2.5G lens. I absolutely love those photos. I have several prints on my house from that trip. Canon and Sony may lack soul, but their autofocus is next level. With all raw files, if you take the time to color grade, you can achieve the look you want with any modern camera. That being said, certain files are easier to edit for the look you prefer, and Sony wasn't for me. The images lack character, albeit they are clinically sharp, and more often than any other brand, they nail focus, to be honest with you. If I shot sports or anything where autofocus was my top priority, I'm choosing Sony, period. But what led me to return the A7 IV was just a lack of soul that I mentioned. It just didn't inspire me to go out and shoot. Like I said, if I was doing commercial work where getting the shot in focus was key and I was getting paid, Sony would be in my bag, hands down. I'd recommend Sony to anyone who wants to shoot weddings, sports, hybrid video, photo, pretty much anything but wildlife and landscape. They just lack the longer primes, and that's something like Nikon excels in. All right, let's move on to the next brand and touch on the Panasonic Lumix line. This is a story where on paper, it's the best video option on the market, and it's often on sale for much cheaper than all the competitors. And for a reason, to be honest with you. During my initial review of it, I found the body to feel a little cheaper than some of the other brands that I've tried. And although I was corrected in the comments, it is magnesium alloy and it is a robust water-sealed camera, it just didn't fit for me. The menus are not ideal. It took me a while to get through them and get everything set up. Why is log mode in the picture styles? It just, I don't know, odd placement. Odd choice for me. The menus just were very convoluted. And that's coming from a Fuji camera, which people say are very difficult to work with. I did love the ergos of the Lumix bodies, and the log footage, while it took me a minute to figure out, and I did get it figured out, it just wasn't as easy to color grade as Nikon's N-Log or Fuji's F-Log 2. I see a lot of pinks in the skin tones, and they were a pain to get rid of. It took a lot of color correction to get the look I was going for. The colors are rich, but that just wasn't for me. I didn't want a camera that was harder to work with to get the video footage I preferred. I'd still recommend the S5 II to anyone where video is their main focus, but I would mention the pink skin tones and make sure that they understood what they were getting themselves into. But if the colors work for you, this is a great video option. Outside of that, I think there are better options with other brands for photo and for video for what I like. But on paper, the S5 II specifically is amazing, and it's often on sale and very cheap. So give it a look. Not for me though. I'm going to mention that. Speaking of Nikon, beloved Nikon, I love an underdog, and if anyone is an underdog, Nikon is. When I got into weddings, I moved into Nikon, leaving Fuji behind. Hold that thought. And the Z6 II and the Z5 and eventually the Z8 and ZF were all amazing cameras to use. I took the Z8 to Ireland, and it proved to be the best option for the sprawling landscapes of Ireland's countryside. Nikon's autofocus has come a long way. I find it pretty close to Canon and Sony, and their specs are there too. The acquisition of red is an intriguing one. The ergonomics of Nikon's are my favorite to mention thus far. The files are wonderful too, but they do lean on the warmer side. So if I were to shoot landscapes or weddings, Nikon's my go-to, and specifically the Z6 III for weddings and the Z8 for landscapes. The warm tint and the colors are perfect for those scenarios. And if you prefer that look in your photos, Nikon may be for you. Nikon's glass, by the way, is next level. It's some of my favorite glass I've ever shot with. The 24-120 f4 is one of the best all-around zooms I've ever tested. They have fantastic 1.8 primes that are very, very affordable. And if wildlife is your thing, Nikon's telephoto primes are some of the best in the business, if not the best. They source their own sand, for God's sake. All right, before we get into Fuji, I wanted to touch on the Leica Q series. After owning the Q2 and now this Q3, I would say go watch my video on the flaws. But to summarize, the autofocus is just okay. The AFC mode, when you use that tracking, AFC tracking, the EVF starts to struggle to keep up, and you start to see some screen tearing. I'd recommend that you stick with AFS. I've gotten the best results in AFS or manual focus, but none of that matters, really. You just put all of that aside when you see the photos. They're just simply amazing. I just got back from my trip to Amsterdam a few months ago, and I just got back from Seattle with the Q3. Wow, the photos are amazing. I printed off some of my Amsterdam photos, and there's some of my favorite on the wall. I can't see myself need another point and shoot, to be honest with you. At least this Leica Q3 is the best point and shoot option with the least amount of compromises. I wouldn't use them for paid work personally. That's just me. But they are a good specialty camera like travel, street, where size matters without compromising image quality. When I'm on a trip, this Q3 is in my bag 9 times out of 10. It's simple, has intuitive menus, it's amazing image quality, compact form, weather sealed. It's amazing despite the flaws, and it does have flaws, but it is amazing despite the flaws. All right, let's move on to Fujifilm. This is the camera brand that I have bought and sold and bought again the most. Every time I got into paying gigs, I left Fuji for Sony or Nikon. I just didn't want there to be an excuse like, oh, APS-C was holding you back, even though I know that's a dumb reason. Every time I stopped doing those professional jobs, I went back to Fuji. And that's because it inspires me the most, and I love the colors. APS-C gives up some depth of field, and to be honest with you, the latest firmware in the Fuji bodies, the autofocus isn't even on par with Nikon. But I love, love, love using them, especially the X-T5 and the X Pro series. Fuji, please make an X Pro 4. For God's sake, make an X Pro 4. And the XH2, by the way, by far has been my favorite looking video that I've filmed with on this channel. Lumix being my least favorite, to be honest with you. So I'm sending the Lumix back, and I'm going to start using the Fuji again. My advice would be, though, if you aren't getting a system for paid work, if it's just a hobby for you, Fuji is the perfect blend of fun and performance. Now, that isn't to say you cannot do paid work on Fujis. There are many, many, many people out there that do amazing work. Check out Roman Fox, John Branch. I just wanted no compromises when money was on the table. Or at least that's what my ill-advised thought process was. To be honest with you, Fujis are amazing, and if you're getting into paid work, Fuji's just fine. Aside from my Leica Q3, the Nikon ZF, and the Nikon FE, which is my 35mm film body, Fuji is my go-to. And until I decide to get back into weddings, no, even if I decide to get back into weddings, I'm going to keep using Fuji. I love using them. They inspire me, and that will show in my work more than any other brand. And that's going to be the best option for me because it's what inspires me to get the shot and the shots that I love. So I hope that this helps you decide what works for you. I'm trying to give real world experience rather than specs on a spreadsheet. I mean, these camera brands are all great, and it depends on what fits in your hands best, what menus are intuitive to you, and what you plan to shoot with. Canon and Sony for sports and any scenario where autofocus is top priority. Great video specs too, by the way, in both of those brands. Nikon's for weddings, and those warm, easy to edit files. Great autofocus and great glass for wildlife and landscape photography too. And the latest Nikon bodies have great video specs too. Check out the Z6 III. Lumix didn't do it for me, but they are good video specs. They have good video specs, and a lot of people love Lumix for their open gate, shutter angle, and anamorphic lens support. So if that's for you, look at Lumix. Fuji for size, fun factor, great color science, and great video. Leica, I would only consider if you're aware of the quirks and you can handle the price tag, because the photos are amazing, as is the experience of using it. But they really are a specialty camera. I really wouldn't use them for wedding photography, for example. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Tell me in the comments what bodies you use. Don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you can. I just wish I could afford to keep all of these camera bodies, to be honest with you, because I love it. I love it. But, it's just not practical. And my minimalist tendencies keep me from keeping 20 camera bodies around. So, right now I'm sticking with my Fujis, my Nikons, and this Q3. All right, guys, that's it for now. If you have a question about any of the camera brands, drop a comment. Like I said, if you can give me a thumbs up, subscribe, it really helps the channel keep doing what it's doing. I'd appreciate it. All right, that's it for this one. Peace.